All right, let's get right into it. When we talk about psychological problems, we usually reach for a label, right? A diagnosis. It feels solid, like we've got a map. But what if that map, what if it doesn't actually match the territory of your own mind? Today, we're going to look at two completely different ways of navigating our inner worlds. The standard map of diagnosis versus the custom-drawn journey of something called case formulation.
So, get this. Here's a real puzzle for you, and this comes straight from the British Psychological Society. You can have two people with the exact same diagnosis, say for something like schizophrenia or a personality disorder, and they can have literally zero symptoms in common. How on earth is that possible? Well, that single fact throws a huge wrench in the whole idea that a diagnostic label tells you everything you need to know. And that's really our jumping-off point for this whole discussion.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into the real problem with labels. Then, we're going to explore a radically personal alternative. After that, we'll see how it actually works. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why this difference matters more than ever today. All right, first up, the problem with labels. Let's call this the standard map, the world of psychiatric diagnoses. Think of it like a pre-printed, mass-produced atlas for the mind.
You see, the diagnostic model is what we'd call a top-down approach. Its main job is to classify things, to communicate. It's kind of like having a set of pre-labeled boxes, and the clinician's job is to see which box a person's experiences best fit into. Now, that's really efficient for talking to other professionals, but is it the best way to actually understand a person?
And this is where we run into some major limitations, which researchers like Sturmy have pointed out. The validity of these boxes, whether they're even measuring what they claim to measure, is often pretty questionable. The model also tends to just ignore a person's entire life story and development, and because of that, it can discourage making treatments that are tailored to the individual. But really, the biggest kicker is its lack of explanatory power. A diagnosis tells you what to call the problem, but it almost never tells you why it's even happening.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates that fundamental split. The whole goal of a diagnosis is classification. It's about putting a name on a cluster of symptoms. The goal of formulation, which we're going to get into, is explanation. It's about understanding the unique story behind all those struggles. One is about naming it, the other is about understanding it. Big difference.
So if the standard map has all these issues, what's the alternative? Well, it's this radically personal approach called case formulation. And instead of using a pre-printed map, this is all about drawing a brand new, custom one for every single person.
Now look, this is not some new age idea, not at all. It actually has these deep, super rigorous scientific roots. It grew out of this scientist-practitioner model way back in the late 40s. Then you had pioneers like Shapiro in the 50s, who started treating each patient like their own unique scientific experiment, testing out ideas about their specific problems. And then, in the 70s, a guy named Victor Meyer came along and turned this really rigorous approach into a practical model that clinicians could actually use.
And this quote from Meyer, man, it just perfectly captures the guiding question of the entire approach. It's not just, what's the diagnosis? It's this deep, deep dive. What treatment? By whom? For this particular person with their specific problem, in their set of circumstances, and how did it all come about? It's just radically personalized.
So the huge point Meyer was making was that the diagnostic model leads to what he called symptom-technique matching. You know, you've got diagnosis X, so you get treatment Y. But that often fails because, let's be real, people rarely walk in with one neat, tidy problem. Our lives are complex, they're interconnected, and sometimes the thing we complain about the most isn't even the real issue.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? A custom map for the mind. But how does it actually work? How do you go about making this map?
Well, it's not just a vague conversation. There are structured models for this, like Lane's Define framework. It's this really dynamic scientific process. First, you define the problem together. Then you explore all the different factors that might be influencing it. And here's the key step. You formulate an explanation, a hypothesis, basically a working theory of what's going on for this specific person. And then you intervene based on that unique theory. And finally, you evaluate what happens, and you adjust the map as you learn more. It's a living, breathing document.
And this definition from Adams just nails it. Case formulation isn't a treatment itself, it's the method of understanding that then lets you design a truly personalized treatment. It's the blueprint that guides everything else you do.
And check this out. The personalization goes all the way down to the therapeutic relationship itself. Meyer and Liddell argued that the relationship shouldn't just be some standard, one-size-fits-all thing. It should be specifically designed to meet the learning needs of that individual.
So if someone has a deep fear of authority, the therapist might act in a way that helps them learn new skills in that specific area. The relationship itself actually becomes part of the treatment. How cool is that?
Okay, so let's tie this all together. What is the core difference here, and why does choosing the right map matter so much today?
Well, one challenge we face today is that the term case formulation has gotten a little diluted. Sometimes it's just used to mean good clinical practice. But when that happens, it loses its connection to its original meaning, that really rigorous scientific method of testing a hypothesis on one single person's case.
And this also creates a huge research problem. Our modern system loves to prove treatments work using these big group studies and standardized tests. But think about it. How can you use a group-based yardstick to measure the success of an approach that is, by its very definition, completely individualized? It's like trying to judge a custom-tailored suit using a chart that only says small, medium, or large. It just doesn't compute. So when you boil it all down, this is the fundamental split. Psychiatric diagnosis is top-down. Its focus is on categorizing symptoms, the method is applying predetermined protocols, and the whole approach is based on a group average. But case formulation, it's bottom-up. It focuses on the underlying psychological mechanisms. The method is individualized hypothesis testing, and the approach is treating each person as a unique scientific problem to be solved together.
And all of that leaves us with a final question to just think about. When it comes to something as complex and as personal as your own mind, your own journey, would you rather navigate with a generic map that's been issued to everyone, or would you want the one that was carefully and precisely drawn just for you?